Hi everyone, my name is Lauren Spear. Welcome back to the HorrorFam.com podcast. And since this is sort of a reintroduction to our show, I wanted to play with that idea a little bit and cover a topic that's sort of related, and that's how do you introduce someone to the horror genre? And I've been asked that question several times personally, and I see it pop up on horror Twitter a lot. And a lot of the time it's in regard to younger viewers, like how do you introduce a kid or a tween to their first horror film? Like what are some good picks for doing that? But I see it in regard to adults as well. Like I have this friend who's never watched a horror film or who just isn't into the genre, who has never shown an interest, but I want to expose them to it and get them into it. And I think that's such a great question and such a great topic to cover, and I'm excited to get into it. I hope you are too. And if you have a friend that you want to introduce to the horror genre, these are my 5 tips. Well, mine and the co-founders of the HorrorFam.com are 5 tips for how to do that. And number 1 is to manage your friends' expectations. So I wrote about this general idea last March on the HorrorFam.com blog, but basically, if you tell your friend that they're about to watch a horror movie and that there's a good possibility that they'll be frightened or disturbed, that's actually going to help them handle it a little bit better. So by managing their expectations, by being honest with them about what they're about to view, you're already kind of helping to ease them into it and sort of diminish some of the discomfort that they may have felt if you hadn't told them. So, you don't want to spring horror on your friends, like if you're a prankster, like traumatizing people isn't fun. So you don't want your friend's first experience to be a surprise. Like you don't want to spring horror on them. Like that probably won't go over very well and won't turn them into a fan. So, manage their expectations, be honest with them, tell them this is a horror film, and that will help ease them into whatever your movie pick is. And second, Christy Bandy, who wrote our article on the 20 best tween-friendly horror films, recommends that first-time viewings for any age be done in a group setting. And I thought that was such a great tip because watching horror movies alone in the dark, that's kind of more of a pro move. And it's not for newbies, but that's not something that we as horror fans would think of because we're so used to just doing that. So you have to remember what it was like to be new to it. And I think a lot of us got into it, having other people around us. So if you really want to introduce your friend to horror and have it be a positive experience, don't just hand them the Blu-ray and walk away. Watch the movie with them. And if possible, gather some of your other friends to join you guys too. So, horror movies were a staple at the slumber parties that I went to when I was growing up. And, even the kids who weren't as naturally drawn to the genre as I was, or always seemed to have a lot of fun when it was viewed with a group. And it's that kind of mixture of peer pressure and wanting to rise up and be brave and cool for your friends, and also, more importantly, the feeling of being safe with your pack. When you're with a group of friends who you feel safe with, you'll be okay no matter what's happening on the screen. Any sort of terrifying thing could be happening in the movie, and if you're with your trusted buddies, it helps to alleviate that tension. And that's actually my third tip, which is to find ways to alleviate tension for the horror newbie. One of the things I always suggest is to start off with a horror comedy. For me, that mixture of scares and laughs it's a perfect combo. And many of us make jokes when we're scared or uncomfortable anyway, so having the characters on screen do that too is just, it's cozy. And then my dad, Rob Tharp, who you may remember from some of the previous podcast episodes, said that if your friend is an adult, you can show them pretty much anything if you're really enthusiastic about it, like your enthusiasm will rub off on your pal. And that if it's a movie you're super familiar with, you be able to help alleviate their tension by saying stuff like, oh, do you see that actor? He was in such and such, or, that effect was done with corn syrup and latex. Like, your knowledge of the film and ability to provide trivia can be a welcome distraction and also diminish your friend's fear response, which will help them have a positive experience and, ease into the horror genre a bit more thoroughly. Well, they'll like it better. And then my dad also suggested that you could choose a horror film based on one of your friend's pre-established interests. So, for the example that he gave was if your friend is really into Civil War reenactments, that you could show them Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. Or, like if they're into cave diving, you could show them The Descent. So by making the base of the story something that your friend is already familiar with, it gives them something to hold on to and ground themselves when things start to get wild. And it also gives them an additional reason to be interested and feel invested in the story, which is, something a little extra there to get them into it. And then you can also go, like, if none of that appeals, you can go for something, this is number 4. You can go for a relatively safe pick, like one of the horror movies that manages to hit the mainstream and just, all the normies feel compelled to watch it. So they don't miss out on the water cooler talk. Like in the 60s, it was Psycho, Jaws and The Exorcist were kind of the normie horror films for the 70s, and then Silence of the Lambs in the 90s. And those movies went beyond being just niche films for horror fans. Like, everyone and their grandma watched those movies. It was just, they had to. It was the thing to do. And, it's the kind of movies that normals are like, well, I don't usually like horror movies, but, they watched it. And those films do have a lot to offer. So, not a bad choice either way. And, they play it safe and serious, but they're fun. They're still horror movies, so. If there's a horror movie that everyone is talking about, whether they're horror fans or not, then that might be a good introduction to horror pick for your friend. You can approach them with, like, did you want to see that movie everyone is talking about with me? And they'll probably say yes, and then that'll be kind of your gateway. It'll be like, oh, well, you liked that movie? Then why don't we watch something really weird? So. And last, remember that you have more options than just movies for introducing someone to the horror genre. For many of us, books like R.L. Stine's Goosebumps series, or comic books like Tales from the Crypt or The Vault of Horror were our starting points. If you're like my husband, Frank Spear, his starting point was video games. So horror video games can be a great introduction to the genre. And our mascot illustrator, Heather Landry, she loves poring over horror-themed artwork. So don't discount things like paintings, the pop-up books. The those are also viable gateways to the genre. And if your friend isn't ready to watch a movie, you could still show them some of your favorite movie posters, or, old VHS covers from horror movies from back in the day, if you're, old enough to remember that stuff, like I am. And you can show them, like, oh, here's the stuff that, I loved looking at this, or this scarred me, and I want to show it to you too. So, just think about how you got into horror. What got you into horror? What made you decide to dive into the genre? What made you love it? And if you think back and you come up with answers to those questions, then you'll have a pretty good place to start. Or you'll know where not to start if your start was kind of rough. So, anyway, those are our tips, and if you successfully use our tips to introduce somebody to the horror genre, please let us know. And if you have your own tips that you'd like to share, please feel free. Let us know in the comments. So, tell everyone how you managed to get your friend into the horror genre. And yeah, thank you for listening to the HorrorFam.com podcast. If you liked this episode or any of our other content at HorrorFam.com, please consider supporting us at patreon.com/HorrorFam. Until next time, bye.